Well, our measures, like I said, we just shut the school down till further notice. Non-essential travel is eliminated, and we're just kind of reverting, setting some people aside to start looking at our natural resources, which is fish and game. Trying to do what we can do to provide for the weak, elders that are sick, and just small items. Nothing drastic like shutting the whole community down to the outside. We're not even looking at that right now.
What about the winter roads right now? Is it still open for you, and are you having difficulties bringing any supplies in, or what's happening with that?
Well, it's still open. People are utilizing it to bring in their own, plus our projects, items that are required for the upcoming summer. Everything's being hauled in. But we're not shutting that portion down yet because we are still allowing people to travel in and out.
I see. So,
which would probably be at our own risk too, Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand. You know, I was when I did an interview with Steven, he mentioned something at the end of his interview which is still, resonating with me, and that was when he mentioned that sooner or later money won't be the issue. It'll be things like, the basic essentials, like water. He mentioned that water specifically. And he said sooner or later that's going to be the real commodity in which, those that still have access or have fresh water will essentially become very important for the rest of Canada. Can you speak a little bit about that and, sort of why you guys go through such great measures? Because it's my understanding there's been a little bit of, some of the leadership got in trouble on that. If you could speak a little bit about that as to why you put such emphasis on protecting the waters.
Okay. So when you look at who we are as a community, this far up north, there's 28 rivers, creeks that flow into Big Trout Lake, and one big river, which is called Fawn River, that flows out towards the coast. So our goal, looking at it, is how do we protect all these rivers that flow into Big Trout, where we have clean water, and this is where a lot of people think when we declare the watershed, they tend to think that it's just only for the community of Big Trout. But when you look at it, the size of it, the waters that flow in, what we're trying to protect is for the future. We do not say for the community of Big Trout or KI, we say we want to protect the water that flows into Big Trout. And you look at a small piece of, I don't know how bottled water is being looked at right now. Like, are they running out? The stock's running low? That sends a good, strong message to the province of Ontario. What we're doing to protect, to conserve, is for a reason. And that reason is water one day will be very important, as the way, as we just finished talking about the economic wheel of this country, it's all economic development based on our resources that we live on, talk about trying to protect every day.
I work under Lands and Environment, and I'm the watershed manager. And back in 2011, we had the people vote on if they want to protect their waters, and we voted yes. So we have an area where we protect water from mining and logging, and all the other things. Just saying we're protecting this area is not good enough, so we're trying to work on it on the land too. So what we're trying to do right now is it's called IPA, Indigenous Protected Area, and we're trying to work it out so that Canada and Ontario recognizes our protected area. It's an indigenous protected area. So, but we still want the people to do what they do on that, like hunting, trapping, fishing, how they sustain themselves. But the only thing that's not allowed there is the poisoning the waters and stuff. So that's what we're trying to do right now. We've gone through steps. So this is the main step. Is this thing. Protocols.
So when new companies want to do any developments, they got to go through these protocols?
They have to follow this.
It's my understanding that you're not against it necessarily, progress, but it's just more of a cautionary thing. Is that what it is? Or is there, can you explain?
It was based on caution. That caution in the wind to us was, you look at Big Trout Lake, it's 38 miles long, 18 miles wide. And if this open pit mine is going to be on the south side of the shore, how deep is this pit going to be? When you look at our lake, the deepest is 132 feet. When you look at pictures of open pit mines, how they go around and around, and the depth is so low. And there's a major river that flows in from there, right beside it, comes into Big Trout, which is very close proximity to that site and the lake itself, and a river that flows right through it that we were told was going to be, these two lakes were going to be drained. And since it was a spawning bed where fish congregate to, it had the two issues that came to the forefront was that's our spawning bed for the fish, and that's where our fresh water flows into the lake too.
The chief and council cannot only decide what's going to be done on the land. The people of Mckay have to decide through a referendum. So that's what our protocol is. There's steps that need to be followed, but the last one is the referendum. And that's what we had to follow with the transmission line. And even if the outcome wasn't good, we had to follow that because it's in our protocol. Yeah. So when most of the people of the 8-7 said yes, we had to follow that. So yeah, we couldn't say the vote is not good or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you spoke with, one or some of the 87 individuals that voted for it, just to see where they were coming from? What was their logic? What was their reasoning for it? Do you know?
I haven't spoken to them, but most of it has to do something with the power failures, outages in the community. And also we cannot get bigger stuff like artificial ice at the arena. Stuff like that. But they don't really know that it's just the benefit that kind of like themselves. They're not looking in the future where their kids are going to have to fight for what we have for granted right now. Yeah, I think most of them had a short vision. Things to work right now better. But the people who had a longer vision, answer said no, because it's going to happen. But with our water protocol, we're just in the beginning stages of that IPA, Indigenous Protected Area, where we want Canada and Ontario to recognize it and protect it themselves too under our. It's how we name it, but right now we just call it Indigenous Protected Area. We want them to recognize it, and that's what we're working towards. I think I take into Our elders shared this with the MNR biologists, and they blew them away. Just to show that we know, our elders know everything about the land. Sacred area, all these things, but they're named in Indian. This is indigenous. All these dots have a name. And if the government says you never use your land or anything,
and we have the watershed, and we had the land use documentation, and the May 15 declaration of our land. So we and the election code that we have, and the KI family law.
So I'm looking at this here.
Because when the residential school, the 60 school happened, we lost a lot of our children, not just here but everywhere. And and then the Children's Aid Society came in. We continually lost a lot of children from our communities, and we didn't have no say on how child welfare was administered, because it was administered by the province, and they didn't take into consideration about indigenous people and their ways of life. So over the years, Tikanagan the chiefs of the Bluecoat district, I think there are about 30 communities, decided to develop a child welfare agency that's owned by the First Nations, which is Tikanagan Child and Family Services. And that was like about 30 years ago now, or maybe a little bit more. It actually happened here in KI. There was a chiefs meeting, and that's when Tikanagan was developed. And at that time, the chiefs' intent was to develop their own law, child welfare law, but they said in the meantime, until we can come up with our own law, we will work with provincial legislation, child welfare legislation. And 30 plus years later, it hasn't happened yet. And Tikanagan has a dual mandate in carrying the child welfare issues for the First Nations that they represent. And they're mandated by the province according to their provincial legislation, and they're also mandated by the chiefs on how they should conduct the child welfare matters that they deal with.
So a lot of these things coincide with how we're preparing ourselves for the future. Like if the government one day says, okay, the Indian Act will no longer be there. So we don't want to fall into chaos when the Indian Act one day gets scrapped. We want to be prepared. And I think as a community, we are prepared by having a few of these protocols or policies that we have.
In 2007, KI decided to develop their own family law. And it was worked on from 2007 to 2009. And the first draft was completed. And at that time, there was no money to do that project, but KI went ahead and did it anyway. And that they worked with Kathy Beamish and Rosemary Mckay from Tikanagan to develop that law, and they were ready to present it to Chief and Council for their review, but that never happened because the Chief and Council were put in jail due to Platniks. At about the same time, shortly after we started working on this, Canada came up with Bill C-92 that they introduced and passed through their government. And it took effect January of this year. But up until that time, nobody knew what was going to happen, how that was going to impact the child welfare agencies in the province, and especially in First Nations. But it worked in our favor because we had already started this and we were just on the tail end of finishing it. And in section 20 or 21 of Bill C-92, it says that Indigenous people can develop their own law to administer their own child welfare matters in their community and for their membership.
And, most of our reserves, if you look at it, is muskeg. There's really no sense of looking forward to the future when you're actually being categorized as an Indian reserve. So I think our biggest problem is that term homelands should be recognized by the provincial and federal government. When we say homelands, we're talking about the outside of the reserve boundaries, that we have lands that we grew up, our fathers and our fathers and our fathers, that passed on their knowledge to their kids, eventually up to me, where I am now, where I recognize 83 miles north of Big Trout. That is where my family birthrights, God-given land, that's where it's at.
The major difference with this KI family law is that compared to the provincial legislation is 100% child focused. Our law is family focused. We're focusing on working and supporting the families so the children don't need to come into care.
I just talked to an elder recently and I asked him when was the weather station built, and he said 1943. So ever since 1943-45, that's when these things were still going. Even the white stuff they used to get that big cone, I don't know, to get it up in the sky, I don't know how they used it. There used to be white stuff where it falls in your skin, it burns you. That's what they used, and it used to be mountain, hills full of it, and it would drain right to the water. This is our water declaration.
I've traveled to different communities up north, and I find that when I visit Big Trout, you guys seem to try to do as much as you can independently before seeking outside help. Is that something that's always been in place, or is that something that you now see as one of the most important things moving forward in the future?
That's what I see moving forward. Like we need to prepare our community, because when the Indian Act one day comes, I do not want our community to fall into municipality status with Ontario. We are in the process of creating our own government, as we already are as a peoples, getting prepared by, like I said, the declaration, the land use documentation, the protocols, treaty affidavits, the watershed. We have our official KI seal now. The Wolf River, where there's no fishing zone. We have the bear policies, election code. We even have our own tax system in place, the wild dogs, the policy, the land use documentation permits. We have all these. It's just a matter of when do we kick in these policies to be recognized as a third government in the province of Ontario. MNR and MNDM, these are the two factors that we butt heads with. But I always make it clear, since we have OPP here, I have no problem with them. And the MTO, which runs our airport business, I got no issues with them too. But it's just the policy making on MNR.
What can Big Trout do to build a better relationship with the government of Canada? What are your thoughts? What can...
It is hard, because KI is trying to hold on to the treaty. What they promised us, we will take care of you. That's what they told us. We're trying to maintain our language. They say we have to have land and language to be a nation. But this thing is being worked on more to beef it up, because with the transmission company coming here, we learned more things to put in here. Yeah. So right now, this is the first edition. The second one will come out soon. Yeah. In that area where they mapped out, no mining, no mining, no logging, no nothing like that in there. That's what that paper says, and that's what we're still working on today. Yeah.
So in that area, there's very little wiggle room. That's sort of
Totally off. Not just wiggle room. Totally off. Yeah, because we want to protect our watershed. Yeah. You drank the water and you liked it. Yeah.
I did. I must admit.
Yeah.
It was. I personally have never tasted anything like that, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's what we're protecting.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if it's, sometimes it gets cold, then it gets warm, then it gets cold again. It's just like back and forth. It's not like there's some spots there's a lot of snow, some spots there's less snow.
Right now, it's I think. What would you say the temperature is right now? It's like I heard it was like minus 30 or something like that earlier.
Minus 22. Well, Texas minus 22.
So do you consider this warm or something? Or is this like around this time of the year? Do you think it would? Is this normal?
No, it's not normal.
Would it be normally what?
Usually about a lot colder than this. Usually, especially in February, usually a lot colder than this. But I can't really say because my truck got cold last night.
This is pretty cool. What's the story behind this here? I like that.
Which one?
This thing here.
Oh, that's
Beautiful.
my girlfriend's mom's, I think. Either my girlfriend's mom's. This one's her mom's, and this one's her mom's. And I don't know where I got that from.
Is that a hawk's or like an eagle's?
Eagle, yeah, eagle talon.
Eagle foot.
Yeah, it's an eagle's talon.
Does your family play sports?
Only one plays sports.
What sport?
Hockey.
Who plays hockey?
My brother.
How old is he?
15.
Is he good? Does he want to go to the NHL or what is his plan? Do you know?
He just plays them mostly for fun.
Oh yeah?
My other one plays broomball. My sister.
Plays broomball? What's the difference between broomball and hockey? Is it the same? What's the difference?
The ball is like that. And the broomstick is like, you know those little circle things with a triangle? That one in there.
Can I see it?
This is what they look like. There's a golden one.
So how would you score? Like, how do you? What ball do they use? Is there a sample? That's how they play it?
I'm pretty sure. This is the stick. The stick, there's lots of these golden ones, metal ones, different kinds of the things right here. And the ball, they come much bigger though. I would rather play the outside game.
Why aren't you just, do you prefer doing this or playing on the computer? Yeah?
I don't play much games on there, but unless it's something sad that's happening, like on Thursday or Tuesday, I'd rather color and try keeping stuff off my hand.
Can I ask you, 100 years from now, if you're not around 100 years from now, what sort of message would you like to pass on to the younger generation? Is there, and what would you like them to see them doing?
Okay. I still would like them to look at coming up with a strategy to win. By winning means knowledge of, meaning we either infiltrate the government by putting more MPs or MPPs into the system, and the resources we will need should come from our own lands, not from government, but from organizations, companies, and detailed communication, which we're doing now, so that, as you said, in 100 years down the line, that thing will be in place for them to implement jobs, better education, better health, better housing, and acting like a real government that's going to be recognized by everybody.